I don't usually do this. All of these entries, all of them, I'm going to read to you. It's not all going to be reading, but I'll read unchanged, unedited. So, not trying to make myself look better or worse. And I can only give a small part of my story. Even with 40 minutes or so, nobody can ever tell the full story. You can only know the full story if you've lived it. And we can only try to pick out some things you think might be useful in the moment. And I can't share every meaningful experience, but I hope that what I share will fit in with our theme. All right, before I go into it, a couple more things. I won't share with you any of the diagnoses that have been given to me. Someone with a mental health condition will have, on average, 4 different diagnoses during the course of their life. 1 year, I had 4 just that year alone. So I stopped hanging my hat on diagnoses. Instead, I try to focus on sharing emotional, mental, situational, social, and other experiences. I also won't share which drugs, both legal and illicit, I may or may not have used, for much the same reason. And some of my entries might have some words that are a little bit less sensitive than they might otherwise be. And of course, most important, I'm not just going to read or talk. You are going to be able to participate too, in a few times. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm going to begin where it makes sense, in the middle. A lot of people start stories in the middle. In the middle when things are bad. I just want to give a sampling. After the middle, I'll briefly jump to the end, show the hope where I am now. Then I'll go all the way back to the beginning. Together we'll go through the middle, and then the end to today, which is not an ending at all. So, the middle. I've looked through my journals for a couple of the worst things that I recorded in there. It was hard to write in those times. So December 2007, and I labeled this aberrant thoughts. I'm going to die. Please don't kill me. I don't want to die. I don't deserve to feel good, happy, or successful. I'm a bad person. Something bad is going to happen. I'm going to die. Who are you? Hurt me. I want to smash my head into the wall, strike myself in the head. Afraid to sleep, delay the coming day. I hurt. I'm a bad person. I'm afraid of hurting people. I'm transparent. Everyone is staring, but ignoring me at the same time. I feel persecuted and denied contact, both simultaneously. Threads in the blanket, my mind flees every way, the past, future, and present. Where does all the time go? I've lost so much. It runs through my fingers, stab, myself shaking. My body hurts. I am ashamed. Shame, shame. I have experienced thousands, maybe tens of thousands of moments like this. Many people have. Some of you sitting here right now may have felt something similar very recently, maybe at this very moment. Perhaps you're thinking of taking your life. Through the decades, thoughts of taking my own life have been a persistent thread. For years, I would fantasize or even seriously consider ending my life dozens of times per day. It felt good. It helped me deal with the pain. Once I estimated that I've contemplated ending my life 2,000 times. For you folks like me with these sorts of persistent thoughts, simply staying alive is a miracle. Sometimes that was all I could do. I grieve for those who have taken their own lives. I understand why that can happen. Okay, let's bring it forward. What is my life like now? I'm going to read a simple journal entry from September 7th, 2019, last month. Today we did some housework all together as a family, putting stuff away, organizing a closet, installing a spice rack. That was this morning. This afternoon I took Enoch to the library. Then we walked around Old Town Fairfax looking for a present for Sharon. In this little Christian bookstore we found a couple small things. I picked a magnet. Enoch saw this little fuzzball handmade chip, 25 cents. He wanted to get that for Mama, and I agreed it was a good choice. We looked at a few other things. Then he saw a little basket with Hot Wheel type cars and wanted to get one of those instead. I said no. A couple minutes later, he came back and said he wanted to put the little chick back and get Mama a car instead. I asked him, do you want to get it because you like it? He said yes. I asked if Mama would like it and said it would be good if he got something she would like, not something he would like. He thought for a moment, then agreed the little chick was better and did not ask about the car again. I was so proud of him. I still am. Later, I told Sharon about the story. without specifying the real cousin, so be surprised. She was touched. We'll appreciate the little chick even more. Today, I'm married to Sharon, who is here today. I have 2 children, Enoch and Noemi, 5 years old and 3 years old. I have a great job, a wonderful career, a rich life. The mic died? Oh gosh. I probably pressed the button. So I have a great life. So full of simple pleasures, volunteerism, and incredible opportunities. But also today I'm not free of my conditions. Sometimes still experience the same things I did before. But my life is beyond my wildest dreams. Those simple, clear moments, like I captured in my journal, are what I live for now. And how did I get here? It's why, because the pieces finally came together for me. Now let's go back to the beginning. So trauma is a common experience for many who've experienced what we can call mental health challenges or substance use conditions. Trauma, it's a small word, it's a tiny idea, but trauma can permeate our lives. So I'm not going to talk about childhood much. Like many or most of you, I experienced trauma in childhood, and today I'll leave it at that. But I'd like to start when I was 18 years old, the first time I became homeless, 1998. So I was working at a grocery store, living at my mother's house. I dropped out of community college after 3 weeks, but never told anybody. Instead, I worked at the store. One day I drove to work, except something happened in my brain, and I just kept driving. I was living in Northern California, and work was 3 miles away. I drove 3,000 miles before I really stopped. For 2 months, I just kept driving down winding roads on the coast of San Diego, over to Las Vegas. And I didn't thought about driving all the way across the country, but I got to Missouri and decided I didn't want to, and I turned around. And then I wound up with tires falling off my car, the clutch dead, in the Sierra Nevada. And I stayed there, high in the Sierras, wandering around for a long time. I haven't talked to another human soul for weeks, had not said a word out loud. In the Sierras, it felt somewhat like a sacred place to turn to. I love the mountains. Some years later, 2015, I wrote what that was like at that period. The mountains were quiet. Standing on granite boulders, I could feel forever blowing on my skin. I was not okay. I was not all right. Forever was blowing on my skin. This was when I knew I'd never be the same as everyone else, forever blowing on my skin. There is a vastness to the wind that can only be touched, not heard or seen. A tactile immersion in gaseous eternity so thick, it slicks by like mercury. I was alone. The Sierras were not my friend, but neither did I confront my enemy there, me, my mind. I was alone. I had not spoken a word to any living soul almost for a month, just forever blowing on my skin. I screamed behind my face for years, but the air had smoothed the rictus away until no longer was I jagged, but smooth, unidentifiable. I could go no further, from Auburn to the mountains I ranged forever. I could go no further, picking berries, my only nourishment for 2 weeks. I could almost be glad it was September. I had no place to go. I couldn't be glad, forever blowing on my skin. You know in the movies, when there's been an explosion and everything goes silent except a droning flatline note and our hero walks around in a daze. Out of touch with the world around, the world is forever changed, but there is a barrier between her and it. Shock, trauma. The world blows forever against my skin. A bomb had gone off in my head and I broke afraid, so afraid, almost 19. I thought those boulders in the Sierra would lift me to heaven. They didn't. It was just the wind blowing forever against my skin. I was naked, alone. So wandering in the mountains alone, sometimes actually naked, my thoughts fuzzed out. If I had been discovered, I would probably have been hospitalized. I had one encounter with police, but fortunately I wasn't at my worst at that moment. My mental state was kind of intermittent. If I recall rightly, I was better in the morning. Even though I woke up cold and shivering, even though my stomach cramped from lack of food. So even in the worst of our worstness, sometimes we have moments of clearness. I could not at that time have expressed them to anyone out loud, but some part of me did find heaven at 7,000 feet, for a small moment at least, one brief moment. Here's an excerpt from the one bit of writing I did on that trip in some of my best cursive. As I gaze across the Great Sierra Valley, I realize that my mind is forever on the horizon, caught up in endless vistas of unattainable beauty. My soul, suffused with joy, reaches out and seeks to grasp and comprehend the marvelous extent in a single mortal view. Okay, the first moment of participation is coming soon, everyone, so be ready. So I reflected, I wrote derivative semi-poetic phrases, and I prayed on the mountaintop that day. Prayed as I rarely had before. I thought I would have peace. I would find peace. I hoped. Yet the next day I lost myself again, naked in the mountains. We all lose ourselves sometimes. You see, I had found 2 pieces of myself on that mountain, but those 2 pieces weren't enough. They weren't enough. I needed more to become my best self. So finally, after weeks in those mountains, getting colder and starving to death, I called my dad and stepmother who didn't want me back to my mother who came to get me. None of them had heard from me for months and had no idea where I was. I had the pain for them and the self-hatred for myself. I was quiet. I had nothing to say for myself. So audience, I want to ask you a question. What pieces of myself do you think I might have found there on that mountain or on that trip? Even in all that darkness. What pieces do you think I might have found and maybe lost again then? What do you think?
Can I go with the found part and I'm gonna say strength
Strength?
that you endured?
Strength and endured. Strength and endured. Thank you.
Touch base with the present moment.
Touch base with the present moment. Thank you. Yeah.
Self-respect.
Self-respect? In a moment, yes. Ooh, there.
Hope.
I found some hope. Yeah, I found it for a little bit. Yeah.
Love.
Virginia declares no emergency.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Virginia declares no emergency.
Virginia declares no emergency. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Encouragement.
Encouragement. Thank you.
Love.
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 What's that?
Faith.
Faith. Yeah, and a little bit of faith.
You said you were lost in the mountains, but maybe you found something yourself.
Yeah, I was lost, but I did find something in a moment in that. And that's what's kind of cool sometimes is that even that experience, on the whole sucked. I mean, that was not, but I did find some little pieces there. And you guys have talked about them. Just a couple more. Yeah.
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So let me jump a couple years in the future. Tuesday, May 30th, 2000. I have walked out of hell, it seems, and back to earth. I still have troubles that they seem manageable and do not overwhelm me. Most of all, they're not constant. I don't know everything about this, but I do know what I feel. I do know the Lord loves his children, and I am one of them. I haven't felt so like his child before. June 1st, 2000, the day after. I'm afraid I may have been overly optimistic about the future. It is back. I've heretofore avoided saying any or very much of the darkness that fills me. I've had to do a lot of praying. Lord is blessed with angels to be near my side this night. I'm grateful for my Heavenly Father. Why is this happening to me? I do not know, and I don't understand this illness I have. Today I read an article in the Chronicle by Daniel Steele, the author, about a 19-year-old son who committed suicide. He was manic depressive, and the description of his life sounded so much like mine, his traits in both virtues and troubles. My mind turned to suicide briefly tonight, the first time in a long while. I wept for a long time on the floor in my room. Sometime in the next couple days, I nearly took my life. I stared at the handful of pills in my hand for a long, long time. My grandparents pounding on the door to my bathroom. Finally, I flushed them down the toilet. My grandparents took me to the county crisis unit. I wasn't admitted to the hospital then because the number of pills I've been holding would not have killed me. But I hadn't known that at the time. I had really believed I would die. My grandparents were very mad, very frustrated that I didn't get help right then and there. I didn't know what to think. I was numb. That was my first encounter with the behavioral health system. I've sometimes wondered, am I glad I wasn't hospitalized right then? Or would it have been better if I had? Really still don't know. But I know what my grandparents thought, that's for sure. My first outpatient appointment was on June 12th. After that, I had some therapy, a few group sessions, but I didn't like groups. Got on some medication. They gave me a diagnosis, the first of many. And I enrolled in an acting training program at a community college. I got in some plays and musicals, but I found the medication turned me wooden. I taught myself to play the piano, but I did not enjoy it. Everything was so mechanical. The psychiatrist had a heavy accident and only saw me for 5 minutes at a time. No exaggeration, just 5 minutes. I couldn't communicate with him, or so I felt. So after a year, I just stopped the medication. I had a small part in an opera. I got paid, so I was very briefly a professional opera singer. Did some more theater. I directed music for a children's theater company. So, again, in that time, this June of 2000 and the following year, reading about Danielle Steele's son, thinking of taking my life, nearly doing so, going to get services, all the other things that I did after that. What are some pieces that you think I may have discovered in that time?
You're building self-esteem.
It was building self-esteem. Yeah, thank you. Resilience. Tenacity. Thank you. I love that word. Sir.
You found like support groups to go to also.
Support groups.
And like future activities.
Thank you. And activities. Thank you. And I saw a hand over here somewhere.
You contributed your talents and gifts to the community.
Contributing to talents and gifts. Thank you. I saw one over here.
She stole mine. You were releasing your talents and helping others bring out their talents.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple more. There.
You're finding joy in yourself.
Yes, I was finding joy in myself.
Teacher.
What's that?
Teacher.
A teacher. Yeah. Beginning to become a teacher. And last one at the very back. Can you shout that really loud?
Con artist.
Con artist. Is that what's going on here? Okay. So, I have no comment.
Is it positive
Yes.
finding your purpose?
Yeah, I was starting to find my purpose. And I was starting to engage my creativity. So soon after I stopped the prescribed medication, I discovered, unfortunately, illicit drugs when I was 21. They helped. Well, that seemed like they did. I figured since psychiatry didn't help, or so I thought then, that I'd try other things. I figured something had to work. And if legitimate means weren't cutting it, I would try something else. You know, one of the things we do is we try lots of things. Some of them are effective and some of them do something else. I slipped down and down. I got into seriously toxic relationships. I moved to San Francisco. I received home services for homeless and vulnerable youth. And eventually, they put me up in the YMCA. I remember running around those streets so scared, so afraid. I thought I was going to be killed. I found that experiencing fear in rural areas in a medium-sized city and in suburbs is one thing. In the streets of a major city, it was much, much worse, at least for me. So stimulating with all the people who may be wanting to kill me. All the voices, some real, some maybe not, so confusing. And one day in 2002, in despair, I began walking to the Golden Gate Bridge to take my own life. I walked, and finally it was too cold, too foggy. My clothes were not warm. Halfway up one of those big San Francisco hills, I curled up in a ball on the sidewalk and cried in the cold rain. I cried. I couldn't even take my own life. So I want you to remember this story as a happy ending. I lost a lot of innocence and naivete during my 10 months in San Francisco, but I found it useful even to the present day. So audience, what do you think I might have found that was useful during that time, homeless, and then semi-homeless in San Francisco?
A new outlook on life.
A new outlook in life? Yeah, I didn't always like that outlook in life at the time. Yes. Did I see a hand over here?
Okay, you want.
Self-medication with illicit substances didn't pan out the way you had hoped.
Yeah, self-medication didn't pan out the way I hoped. Yeah.
Survival skills.
Survival skills.
Empathy.
Empathy. Thank you.
Gratitude for what you have.
Gratitude for what I had. Yeah, I was grateful when I was put up in that YMCA, I'll tell you that. Back.
How to deal with different kinds of people.
How to deal with different kinds of people. Oh yeah. That's
A clear image of the reality of what that path looks like if you ever romanticize it later.
yeah.
Integrity.
Integrity. Thank you. Last one.
New possibilities for your life.
New possibilities for my life. Yeah, that was, so, yeah, I did learn some street survival skills during the state of danger. I learned I didn't like cities. I learned that, well, I didn't quite learn the lesson yet that self-medication wasn't gonna work for me, unfortunately. This was an awful experience, like so many of them are. You know, it sounds kind of, oh, you throw yourself off the Golden Gate Bridge. When you really get to it, that's an awful place to be. So I'm glad you mentioned it's not it, but in the moment, you were trying to connect with something greater than yourself. At least I was. And at that moment, that was death. So I'm going to zoom forward a bit more. Trying to treat myself with drugs became the dominant force in my life for a few years. Then a good period came. In 2005, I found myself living in a small homeless shelter in Sacramento. Some incredibly important things happened to me then. The people who ran the shelter had their own lived experience, their own hope, and they weren't afraid to share it. They talked about the darkness they'd lived in and the awfulness of what they'd done to themselves and others. But mostly where they were now and how they worked to stay there. They weren't perfect, but I began to have a sliver of hope for myself. A sliver of real hope. So I tried mental health care again and met a psychologist who also shared his own lived experience. After our assessment, we left his office. We went down to a lunchroom, I think it was. Among others, it was among other people, it was far enough away that it was private. So at a table, he sat next to me. I'm going to repeat that. He sat next to me. He drew on a piece of paper. He drew diagrams of some of the patterns of what occurs for folks with conditions like mine. The ups and downs of moods, thinking, energy, of thoughts and perceptions. He talked to me as an intelligent person. I've never forgotten him sitting next to me that day. And how it made me feel. It was transformative. I felt honored as a person, though I was homeless without money, using drugs heavily, serious and chronic physical health conditions, and unemployed, etc., etc. We only met twice, but in those sessions, he shared some of his own lived experience, similar to mine. He talked about how he mixed together his creativity, educational attainment, and helping others. He had a master's in choral conducting and a doctorate in psychology. It was matter of fact for him that I could have similar success. I really related to that. I had some hope. I got the feeling from him that he wouldn't be surprised one day to meet me as a colleague. He had special training in pharmacology and made a recommendation to the psychiatrist for a medication. A few weeks after starting the new medication, it was like the sun came up in my mind. It was like I'd never known light. I was shaking, and I wondered what was wrong with me. I thought something was horribly, horribly wrong. Turned out I was feeling normal. I was astonished. I'd only thought I'd felt good before, but this wasn't the extreme of illegal substance, a super expression of too much goodness that runs away from me, or the stability of my previous experience, no psychotropic medication. No, I was feeling just good. My mind was clear. The disorganization shifted to something new without breaking other things. There was clarity. As the sun rose inside me, it began to change my exterior circumstances. After a few months, I got in a play. I enrolled in community college full-time. I was lucky enough, since I had both serious mental and physical health challenges, to get a government voucher for an apartment. I moved to my own place for the first time ever. There were also serious challenges that could have derailed me. My case manager invited me over to their house, their personal house. When I arrived, I was offered booze and sex. I declined both. Some of my family was unhelpful. Someone from my using days mailed me paraphernalia out of the blue. I went to school full time, got into a long distance relationship, was gifted voice lessons from a professional teacher. I was able to join the YMCA gym for free. I wasn't living there this time. I took yoga classes, I took dance classes, and I graduated from Sacramento Community College in 2006. So what pieces of myself did I find? What was helpful about all that? From the shelter, the services received, the school, etc. What do you think were some of the helpful things right then? God loves, yes. Dignity? Yeah. I felt some dignity. I'm going to go over here, sir.
No more suicidal thoughts.
Normal suicidal thoughts.
No more.
No more suicide. Okay, thank you. I wish that were the case, actually. That wasn't. Yeah. Way in the back?
You weren't alone anymore because someone shared their experience with you.
Yeah, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Thank you. Relief? Yeah, thank you.
You began to accept yourself for who you are.
Yeah, that's right. I did begin to accept myself for who I am. Thank you.
Wisdom.
Some wisdom, yeah. Started. Yeah.
Sounds like you went to a great abyss and a search of the power thoughts of death in your own mind.
Yeah, I'd gone to a great abyss in my own mind.
Or in reality.
Yeah.
Very amazing.
Couple more. Thank you.
It sounds like you saw an example of what recovery can look like.
Yes, I had seen an example of what recovery looked like. I saw a few of them, and it was powerful.
Learning more about yourself.
Learning more about myself and discipline. Yeah, that was actually, thank you. That was one of the things that I actually began to feel like maybe I had a little bit of discipline for the first time in my life. That things weren't just going for 2 months and then disappearing. So yeah, there's peer support, there's creativity, there's achievement, there's clarity, and all those things we mentioned. Okay, so let me just do a time check here. I have 2 hours left, great. Why are you laughing? Okay. So, telling these stories, they're long. Why am I telling you this? I'm hoping that it can spark a few things in a few minds, things that might be helpful for you. We hear stories of recovery, of transformation, of changing, of healing. Sometimes I've been moved by them. You always wonder about your own story, what it is, can contribute to others, but, that's making it out the other side. One of the things I do in my life, I hope to use little pieces myself to help others. So let me go to the next part. So I had offers to 2 4-year colleges, UC Berkeley and UC Irvine. I chose Irvine because I wanted to put distance between me and the past. I left for UC Irvine and I had to give up my housing voucher. For those who don't know, UC Irvine's in Southern California. I had to give up my housing voucher since it was only good in Sacramento County. Some people thought I was crazy to do this. I planned to live on grants and student loans. I really thought I had it all figured out. I got to school and threw myself into everything. I was majoring in drama and I got plays and took 27 units per quarter. I was dancing and singing, I was acting. I discovered a love and talent for theater directing. I got a research grant to produce a small piece of theater. I began to hang out with some people. They were mostly not toxic. But after 6 months, things began to get bad. Thoughts of killing myself were coming back. My mind began to dim. I sought out some therapy and psychiatry, but I was a bit too late. Or rather, I didn't give myself the space and time to take care of myself. Also, I learned years later that one of the medications I was on had a manufacturing defect at that time. It didn't work as designed for a short period of time. That's very rare. Didn't work design until the defect was discovered and corrected. Didn't know that then. All I knew was things were getting worse. And I can't blame it all on medication though. There were other missing pieces. I'd stopped yoga. I had a relationship end. I wasn't interested in another one. I did not pace myself. Take time to be alone. So what pieces of myself did I find? What pieces do you think I misplaced or not in place?
Self-care.
Self-care, yeah. I was having a great time, and I was not paying attention to myself. All right, so I decided, since I turned down Berkeley, that I wanted to attend some sort of more recognized school, UC Irvine. Even though UC Irvine is a fairly good school, it was a fairly arrogant thing to think, and I was kind of at that place at the time. I also wanted to see someplace else wonderful. And I thought that maybe another country would help me feel better. So I applied for and accepted into a 2-month program at Cambridge University in England. I left, was already on the downhill side. As you can probably see, there's a little bit of wanderlust in me. So at Cambridge, I did well in 2 classes. They were very intellectually stimulating. It was magical. I ate meals in a beautiful ancient hall that looked like Hogwarts. I was paying for it all from grants and student loans. I lived on campus, made a few very smart friends. It was peaceful, but in one class, my brain seized up. I was too overwhelmed and just didn't do it. So I did well in 2 classes, but I failed that one. I went to some amazing places, drove on the wrong side of the road, ran out of money. I had a summer romance for a few weeks. Then I went home. When I got home, I got a broken heart. And I had expended all my energy on this wonderful adventure, and I bombed auditions, and I retreated into myself. I remember walking to class, and the fear overpowering me so acutely that I almost scream out loud, so I would run back home. I was too afraid, and I tried that over and over and over again. And I could not go back to school anymore. Eventually, I started self-medicating again, illicit substances. So now we're kind of in the middle of the story. We're going to that I'm going to die part that I started out with. And in May of 2008, I wrote, I want it back, all back. Beautiful girl in real life, quality school or work life. How do I inherit, earn, receive, partake, attend? What is wrong with me? Why does my mind flee, skittering away when I seek to grasp it, then when it is grasped? I choke it too tightly and is stifled in my crushing hands. Do I have any words of hope? Please, God, let me find them. And that's what I was writing of death. We're in that period of time of a couple of years. So this was written for the several months before I became homeless for the final time. I gave up. I was evicted from my apartment, student loans burdening me, some demand to be repaid right then, since I kept failing classes. My grandfather came, we drove quietly back up to Northern California, and I accidentally left the most precious possession I had in Southern California, which I've never seen it again. This year, someone asked me, have you ever given up, Michael? The answer is yes, many times. And the next period was one of the longest for me. After a bit, I decided I'd rather be homeless than live with my family. It felt to me that how I was treated was less than human, that they had pretty much given up on me too. Really, they had no idea what to do. I ended up so I did end up in transitional housing at some point. 9 people living in co-op housing. We returned to using substances, got involved with really messed up people again. But mostly I stayed to myself. I isolated, I turned inward. There was no creativity in my life. None of those other things. The program took all my general assistance money to pay rent, except $11 a month. So for more than 2 years, I lived on $11 a month and on food stamps. I had a place to live though. So let's go to, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit now to fall of 2010 to 2011. All right, so why this period? This is actually probably the most crucial period in my life, because this is when I can date to when I finally started putting the pieces together. And all the little pieces that I found, little pieces here and there, that some of them I found for a moment and lost, some of them I start to remember them. I had given up for 2 years. I couldn't stand the thought of trying again when I'd failed, when I thought I'd achieved everything I wanted I had for a moment and lost it again. It was a huge fall for me. That was when I finally decided, I just finally began to awaken. I decided I was willing to try again. It was like a spirit moved inside me, not in a strange and twisting way like some experiences. It was a spirit of clarity, of revelation, mostly of hope. Something very important happened at this time when I was beginning to have hope again. A therapist named Leslie began coming to the transitional house to do the therapeutic writing group every week. The challenge, just to write for 5 minutes, keeping the pen moving the entire time. Not as easy as it sounds, especially when your mind is not always your friend. We wrote on topics like forgetting and bird's eye view. First, what I wrote didn't make much sense, but over the coming weeks, I began to get unstuck. And one of the things, after all the gobbledygook, I wrote something called Exile. It's night. There are no stars, no trees, no yellow brick road. Just a faint green glow beyond the horizon marking the Emerald City. I am not king anymore. This is the last time I look back. The last time. My voice rumbles across the soundless plain and disappears into the emptiness, but I cannot look away. The void where the sky should be closes about my chest. I labor to breathe, my chest shuddering with each exhale, every inhale, pressing back the vastness about me. I roar back the night, courage, lion, courage. And the stars wince into existence around me. Shaking my mane, I drop to all fours and race across the expanse. Somewhere to the south, there is another forest for me. There I may be duke, prince, or earl. Someday I may be king. The lights of the Emerald City dies behind me, and I never look back again. Writing was something that helped me to get unstuck. That began to tap into a poetic thing deep below my consciousness. It wasn't always great quality, usually it wasn't. But there were some things that began to happen when I had hope. And let me read through these. Hold your breath here. I began to journal every day. I got rid of some toxic people in my life. I opened books of scripture, began to read. I began visiting my sisters sometimes, who didn't judge or ask many questions I couldn't or didn't want to answer. I began to apply for benefits, go to the doctor, get eyeglasses, started writing a short story. I put myself through a boot camp of sleep hygiene. And that is something I would love to tell you about some other time. Every morning I get up at the same time. I eliminated watching screens, reading, and eating in bed. I began running my own creative expression group for the other residents. I got donations for us to build this community garden, did push-ups and ab crunches regularly. I attended 12-step addiction recovery program meetings for my church at least once per week. Began seriously working the steps. I started writing a moral inventory in March 2011. I attended our county's mental health board meetings and some other committees, joined the cast of a musical, began attending church services weekly, received ecclesiastical ministry, threw out some possessions, attended trainings, started therapy, restarted on medications, stayed clean from illicit substances from then until now, prayed daily, read inspiring messages daily, never slept in. Whew, okay. Sometimes when the pieces begin to come together, they just come together. Frankly, this sounds like it could be too much, doesn't it? Like I'm setting myself up for failure. That's a reasonable thought. But let's hold that thought. So what pieces, if you were listening, what pieces of myself did I start to be put together then and there? What are some pieces that maybe were there before, that came back, and what are some new pieces maybe? Linda? Creativity. Thank you. Yes? Spiritual pieces. Consistency. Thank you.
You're connecting with other healthy people.
Connecting with other healthy people. Yes.
Service to others.
Service to others. Yes, thank you. Medication every day, yeah. And that's part of the consistency too.
Clean and sober.
Clean and sober, yeah.
You were being inspired, you were inspiring others, and you were inspiring yourself.
Thank you, yes, inspiring to others and myself, thank you.
You went from nothing to something.
Went from nothing to something, yeah. Although I was something there, I just wasn't the something I wanted to be before. Yeah.
How old were you then?
31?
Coming of age.
I was coming of age, okay. Yeah. And I feel very lucky to have come to that point so early in my life. I really do.
Cleaning house from within.
Cleaning house from within, thank you.
Courage.
Courage.
What your journey, and what you're explaining is what so many people are hiding in psychotherapy. You're bringing out a real power of, who you are and what others are. What needs it.
Thank you. And one of the things he mentions that so many people hide these parts, the things within themselves. Last one.
All domestic violence in America.
Something about America, that's what I,
Violence, he said.
All domestic violence in America.
all domestic violence in America? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So I found enough pieces. Many individuals and families in dealing with the awful experiences of distressing thoughts, feelings, and behavior look for the answer. Even when we're pretty sure it doesn't work that way, we really think that it really should. That there really should be the answer to these problems. And I was like that for a long time. Sometimes we think that taking your meds is the answer, or therapy is the answer, or getting a job, or stopping using addictive substances, or more frequent services, or hospitalization. There are many places where we look for the answer. And all of those things can be components of a journey to wellness or recovery. All of those can be part of the answer. But none of them work on their own. And generally, we need more than a few things. And sometimes, even with enough pieces, not everything that ails us goes away. Would I prefer to be free of distressing thoughts and feelings to this day? Would I like for thoughts of taking my own life not to crop up from time to time, even still? But I believe it, I don't enjoy it. And with all those pieces, there are usually one or two that are most essential. The great peer, Dr. Patricia Deegan, a pioneer in the peer recovery movements, has said, you can't organize a recovery in a vacuum. It needs to be organized around something. She found it in her mission to improve the mental health system, where nobody needs to get hurt again. So generally, most people will find their pieces won't hold together until they've found your organizing principles or your keystone. So I found my keystones, the pieces that gave me meaning and purpose. And they're interrelated in my mind. Attending to my spiritual self, letting a power greater than myself change me, being of service to others. Many traditions include these as essential components of a life worth living. Though I had glimmerings, I didn't really understand any of that before. And I found, for me, that my religion was key. The determination to serve others and use my experience for good. This period was not easy, though. I don't want you to think that. Sometimes we forget those who have made it out the other side or have never gone through this sort of thing. We forget the obstacles. Some of them are big, some of them are small. And during this period of months, one of the other residents tried to kill me. Another resident offered me a happy pill. A different resident started using, there was prostitution around. In a welfare office waiting room, I almost came completely unglued and fled. A roommate attempted to take his own life. I was writing, but I ran out of notebook paper and had no money to buy more. Case managers did not show up a schedule to take me to an appointment. I applied for a job as a peer specialist at the encouragement of a case manager, and I did not get that job. Looking back, it was a good thing. At the time, it was a blow. So I'm going to, as I wrap up here, only touch lightly on what happened next. In the coming years, I met someone, Sharon, and married her in 2012, even though I told her everything about me. Wasn't an easy decision, and she's much braver than I am, that's for sure. She didn't know the first thing about the sort of experiences I did, but she can be with me and I don't feel well. And go on from there like it was just a normal part of life, which it is. So let me give you a quick snapshot of the next few years. No particular order, and I'm not going to give a detailed account of my professional journey. That's another topic for another day. But I will touch on it briefly. I did eventually become a peer specialist in a mental health clinic, delivering services to folks who experience similar things. Did that for some years. It was meaningful, and I felt like I was good at it. I began delivering trainings, developing trainings, finished my bachelor's degree, had 2 children. My wife did. I did more advocacy work, developed curriculum, got a Master's of Arts degree in education, specializing in organizational learning. One of my organizing principles is to help behavioral health organizations to flourish, and serve individuals and families more effectively, more compassionately. I ran a small theater company for 2 years, sang in choirs, volunteered at church, gave workshops around the state and even beyond, managed the Wallace Recovery Center. Most of the practices, most of the pieces that started coming to place in those early years, I still practice now. Sometimes I add new ones. And sometimes when I let some of them fade away, it reminds me why I need them. And I get woken up. And 7 years in my wonderful marriage with Sharon, I often feel a deep sense of gratitude for what I have. Okay. So I've already shared one entry early on about the simple joys of living, our family. There's one more last journal entry I'd like to share. And it was from August of this year. So in this entry, I mentioned the sword of Damocles. Some of you may be already aware of the legend. For those who are not, the sword of Damocles is part of an ancient Greek story. Damocles sat on the throne of the god Dionysus. But above him was a large sword hanging from the ceiling by a single horse's hair. He couldn't take living with the fear it might fall and kill him, and he left the throne. Okay, 19th August 2019. RPSV, a peer-run organization whose contract I oversee, has some awful news. 6 of their employees or volunteers have passed away this year, so far. 1 just last week. I'm sobered to remember them in the 25 years of life lost on average to those like them, like me. I want to write a eulogy to honor these folks, to remember hope in death, hope even though we die. A life of meaning and purpose, not always a happy life, a calm life, a peaceful life even, but a joyous, beautiful life to honor as we do all life. I love these folks. Do not know them, they do not know me. I'm new here, but I've known many whose faces and their aliveness swim before my face, giving meaning to what I do. Some lives may be saved, others may end far too soon. During this time here, I know that everyone can live a fulfilling life. Not all of us get there. Let's rededicate ourselves to bringing as many of these kindred with us on the path to a life of purpose. I will do so. Let us all do so. We live a life every day with a threat of death hanging over our heads, like the sword of Damocles hanging by a thread from the rafters. Don't let the wind blow. The thing about that sword, it bothers others sometimes more than us. We look around and we don't see it. Others don't want to be near for the dangers. Sometimes we are forced to look up. Not as good as a reminder, but we cannot live our lives with heads upturned, only looking at the threat. That is not life. Not one worth living anyway. We may not forget the sword, but we sure cannot let it end our lives before it falls. I found hope. I have more than I ever thought I could today. It took years of walking through hell again and again and again and again, and I only shared a portion with you here today. The suffering I would not wish for anybody. But I wouldn't give it up though, really. I'm not sad at all how my life turned out, even with all the pain. I used to regret and wish that I could have the childhood and early adulthood that everyone else did, or what everyone else I thought did. But without the pain, I wouldn't be here now. standing here. Without my experiences, I would not be the man I am today. And I like myself. I love myself. I love my life. I love my Creator. I love my family. And not be here or have any of the successes I have without the grace. That grace. I have more than I ever dreamed possible, but I'm not perfect. I have many of the same struggles. But here I stand, and there you are, all you beautiful people. I love you too. I love you. You can have a life you never dreamed of. Not mine. You don't want mine exactly. You can know true, honest joy in your life, whatever that looks like for you, a life of peace. Oh, wouldn't I have given for life for peace all those years? Even beyond the success of marriage, children, career, creativity, finances, I have peace. And even if I were to lose all I gained, oh, please God, no, I could still have peace. I found it before I had any of these things, any of those successes, and you can too. I challenge you to find your peace. I challenge you to find your pieces. Keep looking, keep looking. If you give up for a little while, when you're ready, try some more. You can find them. You can become your best self. Thank you.